There's a container sitting in your refrigerator right now. Leftover rice, maybe some chicken, perhaps a bit of last night's spinach, and tomorrow you're going to reheat it and eat it without a second thought. Here's a question almost nobody asks. Does how you store and reheat that food actually matter? Not just for taste, but for your safety? The answer is yes. And the reasons are more interesting and more useful to know than most people realize. This isn't going to be a video that makes you afraid of your own refrigerator. It's the opposite. By the end of the next 30 minutes, you're going to understand exactly what happens to food between the moment you cook it and the moment you reheat it. Which foods deserve a little extra care, and the small, simple habits that make leftovers genuinely safe, every time. Let's start with something most people have never thought about. Why food safety experts talk about time and temperature as if they were the two most important words in the kitchen. The danger zone. Nobody talks about food safety agencies, the USDA and the CDC among them, use a term that sounds almost cinematic, the danger zone. It refers to the temperature range between 40 degrees Fahrenheit and 140 degrees Fahrenheit, or roughly 4 degrees Celsius to 60 degrees Celsius. Inside that range, bacteria that are naturally present in almost all raw food don't just survive, they multiply. Rapidly. Under the right conditions, some bacteria can double in number in as little as 20 minutes. That's not a reason to panic. It's a reason to understand the 2-hour rule, which is one of the simplest and most protective habits in all of home cooking. The rule is this: food should not sit at room temperature for more than 2 hours after cooking. If your kitchen is especially warm, above 90 degrees Fahrenheit, say, during a hot afternoon, that window shrinks to just 1 hour. Think about a holiday dinner. The food comes out, everyone eats, there's conversation, maybe dessert, and the leftovers don't get put away until 2 or 3 hours later. That's an easy, understandable habit. And it's exactly the kind of moment where the danger zone quietly does its work. The fix is almost embarrassingly simple. Get food into the refrigerator within 2 hours of cooking. Not perfect, not immediate, just within that window. Why some leftovers deserve extra care. Now, here's where it gets specific, because not all leftovers carry the same considerations. Let's walk through 4 foods that show up in almost everyone's refrigerator, one at a time, and talk honestly about what the science actually says. Rice is the most widely eaten staple food on the planet, and it also happens to be the leftover most closely studied by food safety researchers. For a genuinely interesting reason. Raw rice can naturally carry a bacterium called Bacillus cereus. This isn't contamination in the sense of something going wrong at the store. It's simply present in the environment where rice grows. Cooking kills most of it, but Bacillus cereus has a defense mechanism. It can form spores that survive the cooking process. If cooked rice is left out at room temperature, those spores can germinate and multiply, and as the bacteria grow, some strains produce a toxin called cereulide. Here's the part that surprises people. Reheating the rice thoroughly kills the bacteria, but it does not destroy the toxin they've already made. That toxin is heat stable. This is why food safety guidance is specific and a little more cautious about rice than about many other foods. The advice is straightforward. Cool rice quickly after cooking, ideally spreading it out on a shallow tray or dish rather than leaving a deep pot to cool slowly. Refrigerate it within that 2-hour window. Eat it within about 3 to 4 days. And when you reheat it, make sure it's steaming hot all the way through, not just warm in the middle. This isn't a reason to fear rice. Billions of people eat reheated rice safely every single day. It's a reason to treat the cooling step with a little intention, because that's genuinely where the risk lives. Chicken and other poultry chicken is one of the most trusted proteins in a healthy diet, and it deserves that trust. But like any raw meat, it can carry bacteria such as Salmonella or Campylobacter before cooking. Proper cooking destroys these bacteria. The concern with leftovers isn't the first cooking, it's what happens afterward. If cooked chicken sits out too long, or if it's stored in a container that's too deep to cool quickly, bacteria that survived in small numbers, or that were introduced during handling, can begin to multiply again. The safeguard here is the same 2-hour rule, combined with one more detail that matters more than people expect. Reheating temperature. When you warm up leftover chicken, it should reach an internal temperature of 165 degrees Fahrenheit, or about 74 degrees Celsius, measured with a food thermometer if you have one. That's the temperature at which harmful bacteria are reliably destroyed. A food thermometer is a small, inexpensive tool, and it takes the guesswork out of an otherwise fuzzy judgment call. Does this look hot enough becomes, does this read 165? That's a meaningfully more reliable standard. Leafy greens. Like spinach, spinach is one of the most nutrient-dense vegetables available, rich in iron, folate, and antioxidants. It's also part of a group of vegetables, along with beets, celery, and lettuce, that naturally contain higher levels of compounds called nitrates. Here's where I want to be careful and precise, because this is a topic that gets oversimplified online. Nitrates themselves aren't dangerous. In fact, dietary nitrates from vegetables are associated with some cardiovascular benefits, including support for healthy blood pressure. Under certain storage conditions, though, naturally occurring bacteria can gradually convert some of those nitrates into nitrites over time, particularly if cooked greens sit at room temperature or are stored for an extended period before eating. This is a food quality and food safety consideration, not a cause for alarm. The practical guidance from nutrition and food safety sources is simply this: cooked leafy greens are best eaten fresh, or refrigerated promptly and eaten within a day or two, rather than left out for extended periods or repeatedly reheated. If you're making a big batch of a spinach dish, portioning it and refrigerating it quickly is a smart, easy habit. Eggs. Eggs are one of the most complete sources of nutrition available to us: protein, choline, selenium, and more. When it comes to leftovers, the main safety consideration with eggs is the same one that applies to most protein-rich foods: bacteria, most notably salmonella, which can occasionally be present even in eggs that look and smell completely normal. Cooking eggs thoroughly the first time addresses this. For leftovers in, say, a frittata, hard-boiled eggs, or scrambled eggs from meal prep, the guidance is familiar by now. Refrigerate promptly. Eat within 3 to 4 days. Reheat gently but thoroughly to that same 165 degrees Fahrenheit benchmark, especially for egg dishes that include other ingredients like dairy or meat. One more helpful detail specifically for hard-boiled eggs: they actually keep a little better and stay fresher longer if you leave the shell on until you're ready to eat them. It's a small thing, but it genuinely helps. The habits that matter. More than the food itself. Notice something about everything we've just covered. The specific food matters less than 4 consistent habits. Cool it quickly, refrigerate it promptly, reheat it thoroughly, and don't let it linger too many days before you either eat it or let it go. If this is useful to you so far, a quick like helps this kind of practical, evidence-based information reach more people who could use it too. Now let's talk about a few habits that make all of this easier in real life, not just in theory. Shallow containers, not deep pots. One of the simplest changes you can make is how you store leftovers while they cool. A large pot of soup or a deep casserole dish holds heat in the center for a surprisingly long time, even in the refrigerator. Splitting food into shallower containers lets it cool faster and more evenly, which shortens the amount of time it spends in that danger zone we talked about earlier. The 3 to 4 day guideline. Most cooked leftovers, meat, poultry, grains, vegetables, egg dishes, are generally considered safe to eat within 3 to 4 days when refrigerated properly. After that window, the risk of bacterial growth increases even with correct storage, and quality tends to decline as well. If you're not going to eat something within that window, freezing is a reliable way to extend its life significantly. Reheat. Once, not repeatedly. Here's a habit that's easy to overlook. Every time food cools down and gets reheated, it passes back through that danger zone temperature range. Reheating a dish once is a normal part of eating leftovers. Reheating the same dish multiple times, a little today, a little more tomorrow, multiplies the number of times it passes through that risk window. Where possible, it helps to reheat only the portion you're going to eat right then. Trust your senses, but don't rely on them alone. A sour smell, a slimy texture, an unusual color. These are useful warning signs. and you should always trust them. But here's the catch. Some of the bacteria and toxins we've discussed today don't change how food looks, smells, or tastes. That's exactly why the time and temperature guidelines matter so much. They protect you even when nothing seems obviously wrong. Putting it all together in a real kitchen. Let's imagine a fairly ordinary week. You cook a big pot of rice and grilled chicken on Sunday, meaning to eat from it for a few days. You make a batch of scrambled eggs for quick breakfasts, and you saute a big bag of spinach to go with dinner one night. Here's what that week could look like with these habits folded in naturally, not as some rigid system, just as ordinary common sense. The rice and chicken get portioned into shallow containers shortly after the meal, cooled and refrigerated within that 2-hour window. Over the next few days, you reheat individual portions to steaming hot rather than warming the entire pot repeatedly. The scrambled eggs get eaten within a few days, reheated gently. And the spinach. You enjoy the first portion fresh, and if there's extra, you refrigerate it quickly and try to finish it within a day. None of this requires special equipment, beyond perhaps a food thermometer, which costs very little and lasts for years. It doesn't require giving up rice, chicken, spinach, or eggs. All four remain genuinely excellent, nutrient-dense foods worth keeping in your regular routine. It simply requires a little intention about timing. Have you ever had a moment where you wondered whether leftovers sitting out a bit too long were still okay to eat? It's such a common experience. And now you have a clear, simple standard to measure it against, rather than just guessing. Why this knowledge matters. More. As we get older, as we age, our immune systems typically become somewhat less efficient at fighting off foodborne bacteria, and the consequences of foodborne illness tend to be more serious for older adults, for young children, for pregnant women, and for anyone with a compromised immune system. This doesn't mean older adults need to fear their kitchens. It means these simple, well-established habits are worth taking seriously, consistently rather than occasionally. If you're preparing meals for yourself, for a spouse, or for aging parents, these habits are some of the most protective, lowest-effort choices available. They don't cost anything extra. They don't require new appliances. They simply require building a little rhythm into how food moves from the stove to the table to the refrigerator and back to the table again. Where are you watching from? Where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments below. I always love seeing how far this community reaches, bringing it home. So let's bring this together. Food safety around leftovers really comes down to understanding one core idea. The danger zone, that window between 40 and 140 degrees Fahrenheit where bacteria multiply fastest, and then applying a small set of consistent habits around it. Cool food quickly, ideally within 2 hours. Refrigerate it promptly, in shallow containers when possible. Reheat it thoroughly to 165 degrees Fahrenheit when you can measure it. Eat it within 3 to 4 days, or freeze it if you need more time. And when in doubt, especially with rice, remember that reheating kills bacteria but can't undo everything bacteria may have already produced. So the real safeguard is proper cooling and storage in the first place. These aren't complicated rules. They're the kind of quiet, practical knowledge that, once you have it, becomes second nature. Something you do without even thinking about it, the same way you already lock your door or buckle your seatbelt. I hope this gave you something genuinely useful today. Not fear, but clarity. The kind of clarity that lets you enjoy your favorite foods, including your leftovers, with confidence rather than second-guessing. If you found this helpful, I'd love for you to subscribe and join this community here on Dr. Josephine Healthcare. I'm Dr. Josephine, and every week, I bring you clear, evidence-based guidance on the everyday health questions that don't always get the straightforward answers they deserve. I'll see you in the next video. And until then, take good care of yourself.